A jealous heart is watching, a secret is stirring, and the fire that once consumed them is about to burn again.
The Audio Pages presents Beauty from the Ashes, written by Henrietta. Chapter 1, Whispers in the Mist. Morning fog curled around the chapel of Willow Creek, clinging to the worn stones as though the mountain itself breathed over them. The steeple rose from the mist like a prayer unanswered, its bell silent, its cross steady against the pale sky. Inside, Ella Thompson moved quietly among the pews, arranging lilies near the pulpit, one trembling petal at a time. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. 3 years had passed since her father's death, 3 years since music filled her world. She had once been the chapel's gifted pianist, her hymns lifting hearts to heaven. But when loss came, she stopped playing. Her father's illness had drained the family's savings, and when he died, Ella gave up her dream of studying sacred music to care for her widowed mother and younger brother. Now her days were simple: caring for Mama Ruth, tending to Liam, cleaning the chapel. Her faith had become a whisper, her heart a fortress. The morning light slanted through stained glass, scattering colors across the altar. She paused to watch it, her fingers brushing the edges of the lilies. The scent was sweet, fragile, like hope on the edge of fading. Outside, Liam's soft humming drifted through the open window. He was 16 now, quiet and observant, lost in a world most people couldn't reach. The townspeople pitied him for his autism, but Ella saw something sacred in his silence. He didn't speak, but he listened. To sounds others missed, to meanings between words. She believed God spoke to him in ways no one else could understand. She whispered a prayer as she worked. Lord, give me strength to keep standing, even when the music stops. The chapel door creaked. Sunlight spilled through the entryway, and Ella turned. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, with a rugged stillness that seemed shaped by the mountains themselves. His flannel sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his face shadowed with stubble. But it was his eyes that held her, storm-gray, deep, uncertain. Beautiful morning, isn't it? His voice carried a low calm, almost hesitant. Ella set down the flowers. I'm sorry, we're not open for service yet. Pastor Mark usually. He smiled faintly. Pastor Mark knows me. I'm Jaxson Reed. The name hit her like a chill. Everyone in Willow Creek knew that name. Jaxson Reed, the man blamed for the campfire incident. 7 years ago, a youth retreat at Reed's Refuge, the Christian camp owned by his late father, had ended in disaster. A lantern tipped, a fire spread through the woods, and one of the campers, Micah Bell, was badly injured. The camp burned to ashes, and Jaxson, then barely 20, was accused of negligence. Though no charges stuck, the shame drove him from town. And now, here he was. You're back, Ella said quietly. I am. Trying to rebuild what was lost. Thought I'd start with faith. He glanced toward the wooden cross above the pulpit. His gaze lingered there, as though looking for something he wasn't sure he deserved to find. The town hasn't forgotten what happened, she murmured. His jaw tightened. Neither have I. She expected bitterness in his tone, but there was none, only weariness. He took a slow breath, as though to say more, but then turned to go. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. The door closed behind him. The words hung in the still air long after he was gone. That evening, Ella sat by the riverbank with Liam. The sun had slipped behind the hills, leaving streaks of amber light dancing on the water. Liam was stacking stones, humming softly to himself. Each rock balanced on the next with careful precision. She loved this quiet, the sound of the river, the wind through the trees, her brother's humming. It was one of the few moments she felt peace. Footsteps crunched on the path behind her. She turned, startled, to see Jaxson Reed again. He lifted his hand slightly, as if in apology. "Didn't mean to scare you. I walk this trail every evening." Her heartbeat steadied, though her pulse stayed quick. "It's fine. We come here a lot. It's peaceful for Liam." Jaxson's gaze moved to her brother, who was arranging stones by size. "He's good with patterns. It's like music." She hesitated, unsure whether to respond. Few people understood Liam's ways. "He doesn't talk much," she said finally, "but he feels things deeply." "Maybe that's his gift," Jaxson said, crouching beside Liam. "Sometimes silence is how we hear God best." Her breath caught. The gentleness in his voice was unexpected. Not pity, not curiosity, just respect. Liam glanced up, studying Jaxson, then handed him a flat stone. Together they'd built a tiny wall, one piece at a time, until the structure stood steady. Watching them, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Later that night, the wind carried the smell of rain across the hills. In her small wooden home, Ella sat by the window, the lamplight flickering across her worn Bible. Her mother's breathing was soft in the next room. She opened the scriptures and read aloud, her voice low. "Even darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day." She closed her eyes. "Maybe you brought him back for a reason." Outside, gravel shifted. She looked toward the window, heart suddenly racing. A shadow moved along the edge of the yard, too deliberate to be the wind. She held her breath, listening. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow vanished. She sat still for a long time, praying softly. Sunday came, bright and restless. The chapel bell rang through the mist, calling the faithful from their homes. Inside, voices murmured and feet shuffled along the pews. The moment Jaxson Reed walked in, the whispers began. "He's back," someone gasped. "I thought he left for good." Another muttered, "They say he's rebuilding his father's camp." Ella heard every word. She wished she could silence them, but she didn't know what she herself believed. Pastor Mark's sermon that morning was about second chances, about how God restores what the locusts have eaten. His words carried through the hall, but her attention drifted toward the man sitting 3 pews behind her. Jaxson's head was bowed, his hands clasped around a worn Bible. When the service ended, Ella lingered behind to tidy the sanctuary. As she turned to lock the chapel door, a folded piece of paper slid under it. She picked it up, unfolding it carefully. "Faith isn't about understanding why, it's about trusting who," the note read. She looked through the window, but the pathway was empty. Only the wind moved the grass. That afternoon, Jaxson stood among the ruins of Reed's refuge. Charred beams and blackened stones lay scattered across the clearing, half swallowed by vines. The air still carried the faint scent of ash, even after all these years. He crouched near what had once been the chapel cabin, where his father used to lead prayers before every camp session. He brushed aside the dirt and found a fragment of burned wood carved with the word hope. The word cut deeper than he expected. He reached into his satchel and pulled out his father's Bible, its leather cracked, its pages wrinkled from the heat. He opened it, tracing a verse marked in faded ink. "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, for I am with you." He exhaled, voice barely a whisper. "Still trying to believe that, Lord." A voice came from behind him. "Didn't think you'd see me here again." He turned. Micah Bell stood a few paces away. His scar along his jaw caught the sunlight. "I didn't think you'd want to," Jaxson said carefully. "I don't. But you should know, you're not safe here. She's back." "Who?" "Sophia." The name struck him like smoke in the lungs. Micah's eyes darted toward the trees. "She blames you for everything. The fire, my scars, her ruined career. She says she's going to make the guilty pay." Sophia was Jason's girlfriend, but she left him after the fire incident. Jason looked toward the burned cabins, rain beginning to patter against the leaves. "Let her come," he said quietly. "I'm done running." Micah frowned. "You don't understand. She's not the same, Jay. She's dangerous." "I've faced worse than fire," Jason said, though his voice trembled slightly. Thunder rumbled in the distance. That night rain beat softly on the chapel roof. Ella finished locking the doors, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The last light from the sanctuary window flickered out, leaving the hill bathed in silver moonlight. A faint sound drifted through the trees. Footsteps maybe, or something heavier. She turned, her heart quickening.
But there was only the wind. She whispered to herself, steadying her voice, "You are my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." Still, she felt it, the sense that something unseen had begun to move in Willow Creek. She didn't yet know that the man she'd begun to notice carried a secret that could shatter everything she held together. And Jason didn't yet know that the woman arranging lilies for Sunday service would one day become his saving grace. In the stillness before midnight, as rain sang against the chapel glass, a quiet prayer rose between them, one unspoken, but heard by heaven. "Even in the shadows, Lord, let your light find us." Chapter 2. Ashes and Beginnings. The morning mist hung low over Willow Creek, threading through the valley like ribbons of silver. The air carried that scent of pine and damp earth that only came after a night of rain, the kind that whispered renewal. Birds returned to the trees, timid at first, then braver, their songs weaving a soft chorus across the distant hills. Jaxson Reed stood at the edge of Reed's Refuge, the old camp his father had built years before. Half the cabins leaned with the weight of years, their wood darkened by storms and time. But even in their ruin, something about them spoke of promise. Jason rolled up his sleeves, breath clouding in the cool air, and whispered to himself, "Lord, give me the strength to rebuild what's been broken." He planted his boots into the mud and began clearing fallen branches from the path. The sound of his axe echoed through the trees, sharp, rhythmic, steady. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the chill, mixing with rainwater that still dripped from the cabin roofs. As he worked, his thoughts wandered back to the campfire incident, that single night that had rewritten his life. He still saw the orange glow in his dreams, the screams, the smell of smoke and fear. Micah's face sometimes flickered in the haze, both angry and lost. He paused, leaning against a tree trunk, and drew a deep breath. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Psalm 103:12. He said it softly, as if reminding himself. The verse steadied him like an anchor. But still, guilt was a shadow that walked beside him, a companion he hadn't learned to silence. Across town, the small kitchen in the Thompsons' cottage glowed with soft morning light. Ella stood by the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal. The wooden spoon moved in slow, thoughtful circles. Her mother, Margaret, sat at the table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, eyes watching her daughter with quiet concern. "Didn't see you sleep much last night," her mother said gently. Ella smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the truth. "Just thinking, that's all." "About church?" "About a few things." She hesitated, lowering the heat. The image of Jason standing in the rain outside the chapel the day before lingered in her mind, the way his eyes carried both strength and sorrow. Something in that look had unsettled her. Margaret hummed knowingly. "Thinking can be good, but sometimes, Ella, you think yourself into worry." Ella chuckled softly. "You know me too well."
Before Margaret could reply, a sound drifted from the hallway, soft piano keys being pressed, unevenly but deliberately. Liam was awake. Ella's smile grew, genuine this time. He's playing again. Her hands moved carefully across the small keyboard by the window. Each note trembled with innocence, as if the piano itself was learning how to speak. Ella knelt beside him. "That's beautiful, Liam." He didn't look at her, but the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. It was enough. "You're getting really good," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. For a moment, the world felt still, only the piano, her heartbeat, and the rustling wind outside. Later that morning, Ella walked through the winding trail behind the chapel, the hem of her pale blue dress brushing dew-kissed grass. Pastor Mark had asked her to check on the food supplies for the youth ministry picnic next week, but truthfully she wanted a moment alone. The path led toward the northern ridge, where Reed's refuge sat, partially hidden among the trees. She hadn't been there in years, not since the fire that had sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. She hesitated when she reached the split in the trail. One way led back to town, safe and familiar. The other curved toward the camp, toward the man who had returned with shadows in his eyes. She almost turned back. Almost. Then faintly she heard the sound of hammering, a steady rhythm, patient and determined. Curiosity, or something deeper, pulled her forward. Jaxson didn't notice her at first. He was kneeling beside one of the cabins, fitting new boards into the frame. His hands were rough, splinters marking the creases, but they moved with care, almost a reverence. "Excuse me?" The voice startled him. He turned, wiping his brow with his arm, and froze. Ella stood a few feet away, framed by sunlight breaking through the trees. The sight caught him off guard, not because she was striking, though she was, but because there was something gentle yet unshakable in the way she carried herself, like a hymn you couldn't quite forget. "Miss Thompson," he said, straightening. "Didn't expect company this early."
"I was out walking,"
she said, glancing around. "It's been a long time since I came this way. I didn't realize you'd started rebuilding." He smiled faintly. "Trying to, at least. The cabins don't fix themselves." Ella stepped closer, brushing her fingers along the rough wood of a cabin wall. "Your father built this place, didn't he?" "He did." His tone softened. "Said it was meant to be a refuge for anyone who needed rest. Guess I'm finally taking him at his word." She looked at him, a question forming. "You're not afraid to come back here?" He met her gaze, something raw flickering in his eyes. "Every day," he admitted. "But faith isn't about never feeling fear. It's about walking through it." Her lips parted slightly, the answer catching her off guard. For a moment, silence hung between them, not heavy, but filled with understanding. "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." Psalm 56:3. He said it quietly, more to himself than to her. But she nodded. "That's one of my favorites." He smiled, an honest, unguarded smile that changed his whole face. "Mine too." They spent the next few minutes talking, the kind of simple conversation that feels like a breeze through open windows. She asked about the renovations. He asked about the church programs she managed. They discovered a shared fondness for hymns, although he joked that his singing could scare birds out of the trees. The laughter between them came easily, surprising them both. But beneath that lightness, Ella felt something deeper, a stirring she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Not since her father's death, not since she'd learned to build walls of duty and prayer around her heart. When she glanced at Jaxson again, she noticed the faint scar near his temple, the kind that called stories. He caught her looking and gave a soft grin. "Occupational hazard," he said. "Rebuilding old memories." She smiled, though her heart tugged with sympathy. Before she could reply, a faint sound carried from the distance, crackling like dry leaves snapping underfoot. Jaxson's head turned sharply toward the tree line. The woods beyond the ridge seemed still, yet something in his posture shifted. "You okay?" she asked, following his gaze. "Yeah," he said after a pause, though his tone wasn't convincing. "Just thought I heard something." The moment lingered too long to be nothing, but neither spoke of it again. By afternoon, clouds drifted back over the valley. Ella helped him carry a few supplies to the tool shed, despite his polite protests. "You don't have to," she said. "I know, but it's good work." When she tripped slightly on a rock, Jaxson caught her arm instinctively. His touch was steady, firm but careful, as if afraid she might break. For a moment, their eyes met. The world narrowed to that heartbeat. She felt warmth rise to her cheeks and stepped back. "Thank you." He cleared his throat, setting down the crate. "You're welcome." There was no need to say more. As evening approached, Ella prepared to leave. She paused by the gate, watching him secure the shed doors. The air shimmered with gold, the kind of light that turned everything sacred. "You'll be at the chapel Sunday?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it," he said, smiling faintly. She hesitated, then added softly, "Maybe next time I'll bring Liam. He likes the woods. They calm him." "I'd like that," Jaxson said. "There's peace here even in the brokenness." Her eyes softened. "Maybe that's where peace begins." He nodded. As she walked away, down the path, Jaxson watched her go, the rustle of her dress fading into the wind. For the first time in years, the camp didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. He turned back toward the cabins, whispering a prayer into the cooling air. "The Lord will rebuild what has fallen. He will restore the waste places." Isaiah 58:12. The verse rolled through his mind like a promise. Far up on the ridge, unseen through the trees, a figure stood watching the camp, still as stone. The glint of a phone screen flickered once before disappearing into the shadows. The peace that had settled over Willow Creek that morning was already beginning to stir again.
Chapter 3. Echoes in the Pines. The morning sun broke gently over Willow Creek, a soft gold veil sliding down the steeple of the chapel. Its bell hadn't rung since last Sunday, yet today the air seemed to carry its echo, low, distant, almost mournful. Ella Thompson paused on the chapel steps, a box of hymnals in her arms, and frowned. The town below was stirring awake, shopkeepers lifting shutters, a dog barking near the post road. But up here, by the churchyard, something felt off. She pushed open the chapel door with her shoulder. The hinges groaned as if complaining of neglect. Inside, dust floated in the light, slanting through stained glass, dancing in quiet colors across the pews. Everything appeared as it should: Bible on the pulpit, vases of wilted lilies from last week's service, but an uneasy chill crept along the base of her neck. The silence pressed in too tightly. "Pastor Mark," she called softly. No answer. She set the hymnals on the front pew and walked toward the altar. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet. Near the prayer rail, she noticed something that made her stop. A single candle, half burned, wax melted down the side, though no one had been in the chapel since yesterday evening. Her breath caught. Someone had been here. She knelt, touching the candle. The wax was still warm. She rose slowly, scanning the corners of the chapel. The stained glass Christ above the altar seemed to watch her, compassionate yet solemn. She whispered under her breath, "Lord, give me peace." Her heart steadied just enough for her to notice something else: a faint mark on the floorboards near the back door. Mud, smeared in a partial footprint. She stared at it for several seconds, her pulse drumming in her ears. She straightened quickly, brushing her palms together, and told herself It was probably nothing. Maybe Pastor Mark had come in early today. Maybe someone had stopped by to pray. Still, as she stepped outside again, the morning light didn't feel as bright as before. By noon, the chapel yard had filled with the familiar sounds of community, voices greeting each other, the clatter of folding chairs being set up for the youth ministry meeting. Pastor Mark finally arrived, cheerful and brisk, his hands full of paperwork and his Bible tucked beneath his arm. "Ella, always 2 steps ahead of me." His voice was warm, but he noticed the faint lines of tiredness at his eyes. She smiled, relieved. "Good morning, Pastor. I think someone may have come by early today. One of the candles was still warm." He paused mid-step. "Warm?" "Yes," she said quietly, "and there were muddy prints near the back door. I thought it might be you." He shook his head, setting his things on a pew. "No, I haven't been here since last night." His brow furrowed slightly. "Probably a wanderer looking for shelter. Happens now and then." "Maybe," she murmured. "It just felt strange." He gave her a thoughtful look. "Fear is a poor companion, Ella, but sometimes it's also a messenger. Let's not ignore it entirely. I'll check around the grounds before evening." She nodded, trying to hide the unease prickling her chest. As they organized the lesson materials, Pastor Mark said lightly, "You've seemed brighter these days. I take it meeting Jaxson Reed at the chapel wasn't as awkward as you feared?" Ella blinked, startled by his perceptiveness. "You noticed?" He chuckled. "I notice most things around here. He's a good man, though a heavy soul. The town hasn't forgiven him as easily as God has." I don't know what to think yet," she admitted. "He's different than I expected, quieter. There's something about him that feels steady." Pastor Mark nodded. "Grace has a way of steadying broken things, and so do people who choose to see beyond the ashes." His words lingered. Ella folded the lesson notes with trembling fingers. "Pastor, do you ever feel like you're being called toward something and warned away from it at the same time?" He smiled softly. "Every day. That's usually how you know it's worth praying about." Her lips curved faintly. "I suppose so." He grew serious again. "If anything unusual happens, anything at all, you come find me, all right?" She nodded. "I will." But even as she said it, something deep within her whispered that whatever was moving through Willow Creek wasn't something that could be so easily explained. That evening, Ella walked home along the winding lane by the creek. The water glimmered under the low light, its surface trembling like glass. Crickets had begun their slow song, and the air smelled faintly of pine resin and rain. Her cottage came into view, lamplight glowing through the kitchen window. Inside, Liam sat at the piano again, playing a simple tune she didn't recognize. Each note rose pure and uncertain, like a prayer searching for a home. "Hey, buddy," she greeted softly as she entered. "That's beautiful." He didn't look up, but his fingers moved faster, the melody building as if answering her tone. Her mother turned from the counter with a tired smile. "He's been at it since supper. Keeps saying something about the chapel." "The chapel?" Ella's pulse quickened. "What did he say exactly?" Margaret frowned, thinking. "Not much, just light and shadow." Then he played that tune. Ella sat down beside Liam, watching his hands. The music was slow, haunting, the same few notes looping back as if circling something unseen. When he stopped abruptly, he turned to her and said in his soft, careful voice, "Someone's there." Her heart skipped. "Where, sweetheart?" He looked toward the window. "Chapel." The word chilled her. Margaret sighed. Probably just something he saw in a dream. "Maybe," Ella said, though the certainty in Liam's tone unsettled her. She brushed his hair gently, forcing a smile. "It's all right. God's angels keep watch over us. Remember?" Liam hesitated, then nodded once, returning to the keys. His next tune was lighter, almost cheerful. After tucking him in later, Ella stood by the window of her room, looking out toward the faint outline of the chapel steeple on the hill. The night wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it a faint rustle that could have been leaves or footsteps. She pressed her palm to the glass. Lord, your word says, you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Isaiah 26:3. Her voice trembled. Help me trust you tonight. The whispering outside faded. Only the soft ticking of the clock filled the room. She turned down the lamp and climbed into bed, but long after the house had grown quiet, her eyes remained open. The melody Liam had played still lingered in her ears, weaving into her thoughts until she wasn't sure if she was hearing it again or remembering it. And somewhere deep in the forest beyond Willow Creek, a low thud echoed once, like a door closing against the wind. The forest was still when Jaxson Reed stepped out of his cabin, a hammer tucked into his belt, and the smell of sawdust still clinging to his shirt. Morning mist threaded between the trees, whispering against the pine trunks like breath against glass. Above him, the peaks of Willow Creek shimmered in the sunlight, gentle, golden, familiar. But to Jaxson, they felt more like witnesses than scenery. 7 years hadn't dulled the memory of the campfire incident. He could still hear the crackle of flames devouring the night, see the orange sky folding in on itself, and smell the acrid sting of smoke that clung to his soul long after the fire had died. Every time he swung a hammer or split a log, he was rebuilding not just his father's camp, Reed's refuge, he was rebuilding his own name. He took a deep breath and lifted a wooden beam into place. The rhythmic thud of his hammer echoed across the clearing. Each strike was a prayer. One for the past. One for the man I'm trying to become. One for the people who still doubt me. He didn't notice at first the faint scuff in the dirt near his toolbox, a footprint where no footprint should be, until he turned to fetch a nail and saw that his wrench had been moved, placed neatly across the lid of the old generator he hadn't touched in days. He froze. The forest was silent. Not even the birds dared speak. He scanned the tree line, tall pines stretching high, shadows deep between them. The only movement was a single leaf spinning in the breeze. He swallowed hard, the back of his neck prickling. He crouched beside the box, running a finger along the wrench's cold metal. Someone had been here. Recently. He checked his storage shed next. The door latch hung open, its padlock dangling uselessly. Inside, his coiled robe had been unrolled, and the nails he had sorted by size were scattered on the work table like spilled seeds. Nothing seemed stolen, just disturbed, like someone wanted him to notice. A slow unease crawled through his gut. He straightened, murmuring under his breath, "Lord, if this is the devil's whisper, let me hear your thunder instead." He shut the door firmly, bolted it, and turned toward the lake. The surface was still and silver, reflecting the blue of the sky like a mirror of calm he didn't feel. That afternoon, he drove his old pickup down to town for supplies. The road wound through dense forest, sunlight flickering across his windshield in trembling patches. The hum of the tires against gravel was steady, but his thoughts weren't. He'd seen Ella briefly at church last Sunday, her soft smile, her hands clasped in prayer, her voice joining the hymn, "It is well with my soul." Something in her quiet strength had caught him off guard. It wasn't beauty that drew him, though she had that. It was her stillness, the way peace seemed to fight for space within her, even when she looked weary. He found himself wondering what she was doing today, whether she'd think him foolish if he dropped by the chapel again, whether she'd believe him if he told her someone was watching him. As he pulled into Willow Creek's hardware store lot, he noticed Pastor Mark standing by the entrance, talking with Ella. The sight made his heart stumble a little. She was holding a clipboard, sunlight turning her hair into threads of honey.
For a moment, it looked as if she belonged to the very light that touched her. He stepped out, trying to ignore the odd tug in his chest. "Jason," Pastor Mark greeted, smiling. "Back at it already?" "Always," Jason said with a half-grin. "Camp doesn't build itself." Ella turned, her expression warm but uncertain. "How's the progress?" "Getting there. Cabin roofs are up, and I'll start painting the docks soon." "That's wonderful," she said, but her tone carried something else. Maybe hesitation. Maybe a question she didn't want to ask. He caught it. "You all right?" She blinked. "Oh, yes. Just something strange happened at the chapel this morning." Pastor Mark cleared his throat gently. "We think someone came by uninvited. Nothing serious, but it has us all a bit on edge." Jason frowned. "Someone breaking into a church? That's bold or stupid." Ella gave a weak smile. "Maybe just someone looking for a quiet place to think." But her eyes betrayed her unease, and that struck something inside him, a quiet urge to protect, uninvited yet instinctive. "I'll keep an eye on things," he said, almost before he realized he'd spoken. "The camp's close enough to the ridge. I can see the chapel light from my window." Pastor Mark nodded approvingly. "That's kind of you, son." Ella met his gaze, gratitude flickering there, soft but real. "Thank you, Jason." He hesitated before replying, his voice low. "You don't have to thank me for doing what's right." That evening, clouds gathered thick and gray over the pines. A storm moved in slowly, heavy with the scent of rain. Jason sat on the porch of his half-built cabin, Bible open across his knees, reading by the dim lantern light. His father's old hat hung beside the door, and the photograph of them fishing still sat on the table, faded, edges curled. He read aloud, his voice rough in the quiet. "Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you." Psalm 139:12. He closed his eyes and let the verse sink in. "Lord, I want to believe that. I really do." Thunder murmured low across the valley. When lightning flashed, it briefly lit the trees near the storage shed. And in that instant, Jason saw something that made his heart freeze. A figure, standing just beyond the tree line, still, watching. He shot to his feet, grabbing the lantern. "Hey!" he called, voice echoing through the rain. "Who's out there?" No answer. Just the sound of wind sweeping through wet branches. He moved toward the trees, boots splashing through puddles. But when he reached the edge of the clearing, the figure was gone. Only the smell of damp pine and the fading echo of his own voice remained. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself calm. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Maybe... Then he saw it. Pinned to the post beside his gate, secured with a rusted nail, was a torn piece of paper. He pulled it free, holding it to the light. Scrawled in jagged handwriting were the words, "The fire never died." His blood ran cold. He looked back toward the forest, empty, silent, endless. Rain began to fall harder, soaking through his shirt, plastering his hair to his forehead. He clenched the note in his fist, eyes lifting toward the storming sky. "God, what's coming this time?" he whispered. The wind gave no answer, but somewhere beyond the thunder, he thought he heard it, faint, like a whisper through pine needles, a melody, haunting and familiar, the same one Liam had played on his piano that evening.
Chapter 4. The Fire Never Died. The storm had passed, but the memory of it clung to Willow Creek like a shroud. The next morning, the air was damp and clean, the forest dripping with sunlight that filtered through beads of rain clinging to the pine needles. Steam rose from the earth, carrying the faint scent of cedar and ash.
Jaxson Reed woke before dawn, though he hadn't slept much. The note he found still sat on his workbench, edges curling from where the rain had soaked it. He'd read the words over and over until they no longer looked like letters, just threats carved into his mind. The fire never died. He stared at it now, running a rough hand through his damp hair. Whoever left it knew about the campfire incident, knew enough to strike at the one part of his past he could never erase. "Lord," he muttered under his breath, his voice hoarse, "I'm trying to start over. Don't let the past bury me again." He closed his Bible and slipped it into his jacket pocket. There was work to do, beams to raise, promises to keep. But as he stepped outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were watching him. Meanwhile, high above the valley, Ella Thompson stood in the chapel doorway, gazing at the rain-streaked horizon. The storm had left the windows fogged and the roof dripping into buckets she'd placed the night before. Yet even in the mess, there was beauty, the kind that whispered, "Hope can bloom in broken places." She was exhausted. Her mother's coughing had worsened overnight, and Liam had woken twice crying about the woman in the woods. She hadn't told him he'd only been dreaming, because deep down she wasn't entirely sure he had been. Now, as she swept the puddles near the pews, she paused, her broom catching on something, a scrap of fabric. She knelt to pick it up. It was damp and torn, faintly singed at the edge. She frowned, glancing toward the door, then around the dim chapel. Her breath quickened. The memory of the half-burned candle came rushing back. Just then, footsteps echoed in the hall. She turned sharply, relief flooding her when Jaxson stepped in, his flannel shirt clinging with dew, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Morning," he said quietly, pausing by the doorway. "Didn't mean to startle you." She tried to smile. "I'm beginning to think you only show up when my heart's not ready." He chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. "Then I guess I'm right on time." She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tired look behind his calm. "Rough night?" He hesitated before answering. "Someone's been sneaking around the camp. Left me a note." Her brow furrowed. "A note?" He pulled it from his jacket and handed it to her. The paper was wrinkled and damp. When she read the words, her stomach tightened. The fire never died. She looked up slowly. "Jaxson, who would—" He interrupted gently. "I don't know, Ella. But it's not a coincidence, Ella. Whoever wrote this knows about what happened 7 years ago." Her eyes softened. "The campfire incident." He nodded. "Micah never forgave me for that night, and now it feels like it's coming back, like something that won't stay buried." For a long moment, the only sound was the drip of rainwater from the eaves. Then Ella said softly, "Maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's God giving you a chance to face it and be free." He looked at her, something unspoken passing through his eyes. "You really believe that?" She hesitated. "I have to. Because if God can't redeem what's broken, then I don't know what hope any of us have." Jaxson stared at her for a moment, his throat tight. She didn't talk faith, she lived like she needed to believe it herself. He took a slow breath. "There's something different about you, Ella. You don't talk faith, you live like you're trying to hold on to it." Her cheeks warmed. "That's because most days I'm holding on by the edges." A faint smile curved his lips. "Then maybe we're both learning to do the same." Their eyes met, brief, lingering, before Pastor Mark's voice echoed from outside. "Ella, could you bring the donation ledger? And Jaxson, good to see you, son. We'll need some help fixing that roof beam." "On it," Jaxson called back, clearing his throat. As Ella turned to grab the ledger, she whispered, "Don't let the note get to you. Fear thrives in shadows, remember, but God's light never hides for long." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and maybe that's why the shadows find us, because they're scared of what light can do." By afternoon, the sun had broken through. Birds flitted between branches, and the smell of damp earth lingered sweet and heavy. Jaxson climbed up the roof of the chapel to replace a loose plank. From this height, he could see all of Willow Creek spread below, the winding dirt roads, the line of smoke from the diner's chimney, and the glint of the lake beyond. And, near the edge of the forest, his own camp, a cluster of half-built cabins, looked small and lonely against the great sweep of green. Ella stood below, holding the ladder steady, her skirt brushing against the grass. "You missed a nail on the right," she called. "I'll get it," he said, leaning down. "You sure that ladder's steady?" "I'm steady," she replied. "It's you I'm worried about." He laughed softly. "You sound like my mother." "Then she must be a wise woman." "She used to be," he said quietly, before catching himself. "Sorry, didn't mean to sound bitter." Ella looked up. "Don't apologize for being honest." The hammer struck once, twice, echoing down the hill. When he was done, he sat at the roof's edge, looking down at her. "You ever think about leaving Willow Creek?" She shaded her eyes with one hand. "All the time. But where would I go? My mom needs me. Liam's special. And truthfully, this town is all I've ever known." He nodded. "I thought leaving would fix everything once, but you can't outrun what's inside you. What did you find when you came back?" He looked past her toward the distant trees. "That healing doesn't wait for you to be ready. It shows up like a sunrise, quiet, uninvited, impossible to stop." Her voice softened. "And does it hurt less now?" He smiled faintly. "Some days. Other days, it hurts just enough to remind me I'm still alive." For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them stilled, only the hum of insects and the faint sigh of wind through the pines. That night, Ella found herself sitting at her window again, looking out toward Reed's refuge. The moon hung low, painting the forest silver. She could see a flicker of light, Jaxson's lantern glowing faintly among the trees. She closed her Bible, where a verse had caught her heart earlier that evening. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." She whispered it aloud, her voice barely a breath. Let that be true tonight. Down by the camp, Jaxson sat by his workbench, the same verse open in his own Bible. He smiled faintly without knowing why, unaware that the same words were being spoken by another voice across the valley. He rubbed his thumb against the edge of the page, letting the peace of it steady his heartbeat. Then, from somewhere behind him, a twig snapped. He turned sharply. Lantern light swung across the clearing, catching only the thick wall of trees. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady but low. Silence. He took a few steps forward, scanning the shadows. The air felt too still. Then, a sound. Not footsteps this time, but something dragging lightly across wood. He spun around. The door to the shed stood open again. His chest tightened. He walked toward it, every instinct on edge. Inside, the faint smell of smoke drifted through the damp air. Old smoke, the kind that clings to burn things. He lifted the lantern, its light trembling across the walls, and there, on one of the support beams, were the same words from the note. The fire never died. Beneath it, something else, smaller, fainter, freshly carved. "She will." Jaxson's breath caught. "She?" he whispered, eyes narrowing. "Who?" Then he heard it, faint laughter, female, echoing through the woods. It vanished as quickly as it came, swallowed by the whispering of the pines. Jaxson stood frozen, his hand gripping the beam, the scripture from earlier burning in his chest. "Even darkness is not dark to you." He whispered it again, louder this time, not to remind himself, but to defy the fear rising around him. "Even darkness is not dark to you, Lord." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. The air grew colder, and somewhere, just beyond the clearing, unseen eyes watched him, waiting.
Chapter 5. The Fracture of Peace. The morning light over Willow Creek carried no warmth that day. A pale sun hung above the mountains, filtered through a gray haze that looked almost like smoke. Ella Thompson stood at the window of her cottage, watching it rise, feeling that something unseen had shifted in the air, like a breath held too long. Her mother's coughing echoed softly from the back room. The sound was no longer fleeting. It came in waves now, deep, raw, tearing through the thin walls. Ella's hands tightened around the teacup she held. The scent of chamomile filled the air, but even that sweetness could not disguise the metallic tang of fear. She set the cup down and walked quietly to her mother's room. Margaret lay half upright in bed, her skin pale against the quilt. "Morning, Mama," Ella said gently, forcing a brightness she didn't feel. Her mother opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "You're up early again." "I never really slept." "Dreams?" "More like thoughts," Ella said. "The chapel feels different lately. There's this sense of something waiting." Margaret coughed again, a painful sound. "You've always felt things deeper than others. Maybe God's trying to show you something." Ella sat at her side, brushing a strand of silver hair from her mother's forehead. "Or maybe I'm just tired of shadows," she whispered. Her mother's eyes softened. "Shadows only exist because there's light, baby. Don't forget that." Ella smiled faintly. "You sound like Pastor Mark." "Then he must be right," Margaret said, her voice weakening. "Go on now. Check on your brother. He's been too quiet this morning." Ella hesitated, then stood, tucking the quilt around her mother before leaving the room. In the living room, Liam sat at the piano again. The same melody drifted from his fingers, soft, haunting, the one he'd played the night of the storm. She listened for a moment, letting it calm her pulse, but as she drew closer, she noticed something that made her heart lurch. A folded piece of paper lay on the piano bench beside him. It wasn't his usual drawing paper. It looked old, torn from a notebook. Her name was written on it in shaky letters, Ella. She opened it. Inside, in dark charcoal, was a rough sketch of the chapel. But it wasn't whole. The windows were broken. Flames crawled up one side. And in front of it stood a tall figure, its features shaded black. Ella's breath caught. "Liam, where did you get this?" Her brother's fingers stilled on the keys. He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to her. "She was outside," he said softly, "watching." The words hit her like cold water. "She? Who?" He pointed toward the woods beyond the cottage. "The woman in the trees." Ella knelt in front of him, gripping his hands. "Liam, what did you see?" He shook his head rapidly, breathing faster. "She was looking at the chapel, then at me." Ella's heart pounded. She pulled him into her arms, whispering, "You're safe, sweetheart. You're safe." But deep down, she wasn't sure she believed it. That afternoon, she drove to Reed's refuge. Jaxson was outside repairing a fence that bordered the lake. His shirt was damp with sweat, his jaw tight with focus. When he saw her, surprise flashed across his face, followed by concern. "Della, everything all right?" She climbed out of her car, clutching the sketch in her hand. "Liam drew this." He took the paper, eyes narrowing as he studied the dark figure before the burning chapel. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He said, "He saw someone?" "Yes, a woman." He stared toward the woods, the same direction where he'd seen that shadowed figure days ago, the same woods where the laughter had come from. "Ella, he thinks..." Her pulse quickened. "You think she's connected to the fire, to your past?"
He hesitated. Maybe, or maybe she just wants me to believe that. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Tell me what really happened that night, Jaxson. He looked away, his expression tightening. I was 23. My dad and I ran the camp together. It was a youth retreat weekend. Micah, my best friend then, had been in charge of keeping the fire under control. He left for a few minutes to grab something from the truck. I didn't realize until too late that he'd left his phone on a log, screen still lit. He'd been texting while driving earlier that night. His truck caught a spark from one of the torches we used for lighting. He paused, his voice breaking. The wind carried the flames straight to the woods. We tried to stop it, but it was like fighting God's own breath. Micah got burned. The town blamed me. Said I left the fire unattended. Her throat tightened. And you never defended yourself? I did, he said quietly. But people see what they want to see. My dad died a month later. Heart attack. I think the shame killed him faster than grief. He looked up, but then, his eyes raw. That's why I came back. To finish what he started. To prove that not everything ends in ashes. Tears stung her eyes. You don't have to prove that to me. Something unspoken passed between them. A fragile, trembling closeness that felt almost sacred. He reached up, brushing a smudge of dirt on her cheek. You shouldn't have to carry everyone else's pain, he murmured. Her breath hitched, their eyes locked. I'm not. I'm carrying yours too. For a heartbeat, silence held them, heavy with meaning, unbroken except for the wind rustling through the pines. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, frowning. Unknown number. A message. He read it once, then again. The chapel burns again tonight. His blood ran cold. Ella saw his face pale. What is it? He handed her the phone wordlessly. When she read the message, her fingers trembled. This can't be real, she breathed. Someone's trying to scare us. But he shook his head. No, Ella. They're promising something. By dusk, Pastor Mark gathered a few volunteers to check the chapel grounds. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of intrusion. But Ella couldn't shake the feeling that eyes followed them from the shadows. When she turned to leave, she noticed a faint mark carved into one of the pews near the altar. Small, deliberate, almost hidden by the wood grain. A single letter. S. Her breath caught. Pastor? She called, but he was already outside speaking to the deacons. She knelt beside the pew, running her fingers over the mark. The wood was cold, freshly cut. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled through the trees, bending them like worshippers bowing low before unseen power. Jaxson couldn't sleep. He paced the cabin floor, checking the windows, every sense on edge. His lantern flickered, casting long shadows against the wall. Then faintly, through the roar of rain, he heard something that didn't belong. Glass. Breaking. He grabbed the lantern and stepped outside. The rain lashed his face, blurring the world into streaks of gray and silver. He moved toward the sound, toward his shed. Its door hung open again. Inside, the words carved into the beam glimmed with wetness. But something new had been added beneath them. It starts with her. Before he could move, something crashed behind him, a rock, thrown through his cabin window. He spun around, heart pounding. No one was there. Only the forest, alive with rain, trembling with wind. He shouted into the storm, "Show yourself!" Thunder answered. Nothing else. At the same moment, Ella bolted upright in bed. A smell, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the window. Smoke. She ran to the window, eyes wide. A thin light of gray rose from the direction of the chapel. Her heart lurched. She grabbed her coat, whispering, "Lord, please no," and rushed out into the rain. When she reached the hilltop, her worst fear came to life. The chapel door hung open. Smoke curled from inside, glowing faintly orange. Someone had tried to set the hymnals aflame, but the damp air had kept it from spreading far. Still, the scent was strong, choking, cruelly familiar. And on the altar, half burned and twisted, lay another piece of paper. She picked it up with shaking hands. "He'll burn for what he did." Her knees gave way. "God," she whispered, voice breaking, "not again." Behind her, footsteps splashed through puddles. She turned. Jaxson was there, soaked, breathless, his eyes wide open.
"I saw the smoke from my cabin," he said. "Ella, are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears mingling with the rain. "Whoever's doing this, they won't stop." He stepped closer, gripping her shoulders. "Then neither will I." The wind roared through the broken door, scattering ashes across the floor like dark snow. They stood there in silence, two souls framed in the flicker of ruin and rain. Then, softly, Jaxson whispered the verse that steadied them both. "When you pass through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." Isaiah 43:2. Ella closed her eyes, letting the words sink into her trembling heart. And though the chapel smoked and the night screamed, somewhere deep inside her, light still refused to hide.
Chapter 6. Ashes Beneath Our Feet. The scent of rain lingered long after the clouds had drifted away. It clung to the earth-like memory, damp pine, cold stone, and the faint sweetness of burned wood from the old chapel's ruined eaves. Ella Thompson stood beneath the ridge where the trees opened to the valley, the wind teasing her hair as she gazed down at Willow Creek. The afternoon light was soft, heavy with gold. Everything seemed calm, but calm had become an illusion she no longer trusted. It had been 2 weeks since the night she'd found the chapel doors open, 2 weeks since Jaxson had found that note pinned to his gate. The fire never died. The words still haunted her. She hadn't told her mother about them. The older woman had been 2 weeks since her diagnosis, her lungs easily irritated by the smoke from that same night. So Ella carried the unease alone, folding it between her prayers like a secret she was afraid God already knew. That morning, the chapel smelled faintly of wax and rain-soaked hymnals. She'd come early to polish the pews and set fresh candles at the altar, small, steady lights against a world that felt like it was unraveling at the edges. She paused to touch the pulpit, her fingers brushing the carved cross. Her voice was barely a whisper. "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." Isaiah 43:2. Her throat tightened as she said it aloud. The verse felt like a promise meant for someone else, someone braver. Her mother's voice had trembled last night when she said, "God still writes miracles in ashes, Ella." But what if he didn't this time? What if the ashes only meant loss? She blinked hard, refusing the thought. And that's when she heard it. A faint creak. The chapel door. It wasn't the sound of wind this time. It was deliberate, slow, cautious. She turned sharply, heart leaping. "Hello?" Only silence answered. She walked toward the entrance, her footsteps echoing across the wooden floor. When she reached the doorway, the hinge swayed slightly, as if someone had just slipped out. But outside there was no one, only the fading mist curling across the graveyard. A shiver threaded through her spine. The hairs on her arms rose. She locked the door this time and whispered a prayer, her breath trembling. "Lord,
Let your angels guard this place. Let your peace be stronger than fear. Later that afternoon, Jaxson arrived to help her carry in new hymn books from the storage shed. He'd been coming by often lately, his presence steady as the mountain itself. When he stepped into the chapel's soft light, dust motes swirled around him like drifting stars. His shirt was streaked with paint, his hands calloused and rough, a man rebuilding not just walls, but his own name. "Brought the rest of the books," he said with that quiet smile that always seemed to undo her thoughts. "Thank you." Their fingers brushed as she took one from him, just for a heartbeat, but it lingered longer than either admitted. He studied her face, his brow furrowing slightly. "You've been on edge lately. Something wrong?" Ella hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, the door, the unease, the eyes she sometimes felt on her back when she prayed alone. But another part, the cautious part that had learned to guard her heart, held back. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind." He didn't press her, but his gaze said he didn't believe her either. Instead, he set down the books and joined her near the front pew. "You know," he murmured, looking toward the altar, "I used to think rebuilding this camp would be enough to fix everything, that if I worked hard enough, maybe the past would stop following me." His voice faltered, the weight of memory pressing between them. "But sometimes it feels like the fire never really ended. It just changed shape." Her breath caught. The same words. The fire never died. She turned toward him. "Jaxson, that night, the campfire incident, what really happened?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening like storm clouds over the hills. "I was careless. Not drunk, not reckless, just distracted. I thought I put out the embers. I didn't. Micah was there. He got hurt. Everyone blamed me, and maybe they were right to." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you ever stop praying after that?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "No, but I stopped believing God would ever listen." Silence wrapped around them like twilight. Ella reached out before she could stop herself, her fingers grazing his wrist. "He listens, Jaxson, even when the fire's loud, even when all we hear are our own mistakes echoing back." His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers tangling briefly, not in romance, but in something deeper, older, a connection forged in shared brokenness. He exhaled slowly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," she said with a faint, trembling smile. "But faith rarely is." They spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet companionship, repairing hymn book shelves and sweeping the aisles. The tension that lingered in Ella's chest softened under the rhythm of their work. For a moment, peace returned. Then, just as the sun began to dip, Liam appeared at the chapel doorway. His small frame was tense, his face pale. "Ella," he whispered, voice trembling, There's someone outside." She rushed to him, crouching down. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Who?" He pointed toward the ridge beyond the trees. "A man, standing by the old fence. He was watching." Jaxson was already moving, his boots striking the floorboards hard. "Stay here," he ordered gently, then stepped out into the dusk. Ella grabbed Liam's hand, heart pounding. Through the open window, she saw Jaxson's silhouette move across the field, a lone figure against the deepening orange light. He stopped at the fence, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. Then from somewhere within the forest came the faint snap of a branch, and a shadow vanished deeper into the pines. When Jaxson returned, the look on his face was grave. "No one there now," he said, his voice low, "but someone was. Footprints, same size as the ones I found near my camp." Ella's stomach turned. "Who would—" "I don't know." His gaze met hers. "But whoever they are, they're watching both of us." For the first time, fear and something like faith collided inside her chest. He took a slow breath, eyes steady on hers. "Ella, I won't let anything happen to you or Liam. You have my word." Her throat tightened. "Why are you helping us?" "Because you didn't run when everyone else did. Because you still see something in me worth saving." Her eyes filled. She couldn't find words, so she just nodded. And when she did, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling slightly. It was the smallest gesture, but in that moment, it meant everything. That night, as she tucked Liam into bed and watched the shadows dance on the walls, the verse returned to her like a whisper. "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." She prayed it over her brother, over Jaxson, over herself, not knowing that before the week was over, the fire would come again. Only this time, it wouldn't be in the forest. It would begin right here, beneath the chapel's fragile light. The forest was quieter than usual. Too quiet. Jaxson noticed it as he worked near the lake, tightening the hinges of the camp's old wooden dock. The gentle creak of his wrench echoed against the still water, and even the usual chorus of sparrows seemed hushed. It was the kind of silence that whispered, "Something's not right." He stood squinting at the mist-covered pines that guarded the ridge. The scent of damp cedar hung heavy. Then, a faint crack. A twig snapping underfoot somewhere behind him. Jaxson's pulse tightened. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. No one, just the dense green pressing close, the breath of the mountains still as prayer. He tried to shake it off, probably a raccoon again, but when he walked back toward the cabin, he saw it. The latch on his tool shed had been pried open. A crowbar mark glinted faintly under the early light. He crouched beside it. His fingers brushed fresh splinters. Someone had been here, and recently. The unease he'd been fighting for weeks began to take shape. First the misplaced saw, then the slashed tire on his truck, and now this. It wasn't just random mischief. Someone was watching. Someone wanted him rattled. His jaw tensed. He whispered under his breath, "Lord, give me wisdom, because I don't want to lose my temper before I find the truth." He pushed open the shed door. Tools scattered across the floor, wrenches, oil cans, a broken lantern. But what made his breath catch wasn't the mess. It was the name carved crudely on the wooden wall. Guilty. The word was gouged deep, angry like a scar.
He stood there, every muscle rigid, the memory of flames flashing through his mind. The old campfire incident, the smoke, the shouting, Micah's cry for help. For years, the guilt had lingered like a phantom shadow, even though he'd been cleared. And now, someone wanted him to relive it. He stepped back, steadying himself, when the crunch of gravel broke the silence again. He spun, and there she was, Ella. Her dress fluttered in the soft breeze, her face pale under the gray morning light. She looked smaller, almost fragile, but her eyes carried the same steady strength he had come to know, the kind that made him breathe easier just by being near. "Jaxson," she said quietly, her voice trembling. I felt something was wrong. Pastor Mark mentioned you missed the morning study. I thought I'd come check." He tried to compose his face, to hide the swirl of fear, anger, and tenderness that threatened to show. "You shouldn't have come alone." "I'm not afraid," she said, though her hand gripped the strap of her bag a little tighter. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He exhaled slowly, then motioned her closer. "You might say that." He pointed toward the shed. "Someone broke in." She followed his gaze, and when she saw the carved word, her lips parted in shock. "Who would—" "I don't know yet," Jaxson said, "but it's not the first time. Whoever is doing this knows about the fire."
Ella took a step closer, her eyes searching his. "You think someone's trying to blame you again?" He hesitated, then nodded once. "Maybe. Or maybe they're trying to make sure I never forget." For a long moment, the only sound was the rustle of leaves. Ella reached out, slow, hesitant, and touched his arm. Her fingers were cool, gentle. "You're not who you were back then, Jaxson. I don't care what shadows say. God's grace already cleared your name." His throat tightened. He wanted to believe it, really believe it, but the word on that wall burned in his mind. "Sometimes I think the past doesn't want to stay buried." "Then maybe," she whispered, "it needs to be redeemed instead of buried." He looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes shimmered with quiet conviction, her voice steady like a psalm in the wind. In that instant, something in him broke open, that cold, guarded space he'd kept sealed for years. He said softly, "You always talk like faith is sunlight, Ella. Like it could touch anything and make it new." She smiled faintly. "Because I've seen it, even in ashes." He almost smiled back. "You sound like my grandmother." "Then she must have been wise," Ella said, her tone lighter now. He chuckled, the tension easing for a heartbeat. "She was. Used to say, 'Even darkness can't hide from God's eyes, boy.'" Ella nodded. Psalm 139. Then, quoting softly, she whispered, "Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is light to you." The verse lingered between them like a living thing, steady, luminous, and for the first time in a long while, Jaxson felt like the light was real again. He turned toward the lake, the surface rippling under the rising breeze. "Ella, thank you." "For what?" "For showing up." She smiled faintly. "I think God keeps sending me where I need to be, even when I don't understand why." They stood there, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked pine. He wanted to reach for her hand, just to let her know he understood, but before he could, a sound echoed through the woods. A single, distant whistle. Low, sharp, almost mocking. Ella stiffened. What was that? Jaxson's eyes narrowed. He scanned the trees. Not sure. But whoever it is, they're not far. The whistle came again, closer this time. Then, from the edge of the forest, a shadow moved. A man stepped forward. The hood of his jacket hid part of his face, but when he spoke, Jaxson felt the world tilt. "Been a long time, Jay." "Huh. 7 years? You still carrying the blame from my fire?" Ella gasped softly. "Micah?" The hood came down, revealing a scar tracing his temple. His eyes were wild, a storm barely contained. Jaxson took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here." Micah smirked. "Neither should your past, but here we are." Ella's hand found Jaxson's sleeve unconsciously, her fingers trembling. And then, before Jaxson could reply, Micah stepped back into the trees and said quietly, almost to himself, "You don't even know who you're really after, do you?" The air still. "Who?" Jaxson demanded. Micah's smile faded. "She's back, Jay, and she's angrier than before." A single crack of thunder rolled in the distance. The smell of rain thickened. Ella's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Who's back?" Micah looked up, his expression haunted. "Sophia." The name fell like lightning through the clearing, splitting the fragile piece in two. And before they could move, Micah stepped back into the trees. His last words drifted on the wind. "Watch the chapel. She's already been there."
Chapter 7. The Fire Returns. Rain came that night like a slow confession, not sudden or fierce, but steady, deliberate.
as if the heavens themselves were cleansing the earth of its secrets. Ella sat by her window, listening to the rhythm of it. Each drop against the pane felt like a heartbeat too loud. The sound filled her little room above the kitchen, wrapping around her in the kind of silence that carried more questions than peace. She hadn't told her mother what Micah had said. Not yet. How could she? Her mother was already fragile, her cough worsening, her strength fading by the day. And Liam, sweet, restless Liam, had sensed something anyway. He had sat at her door earlier, tapping his fingers against the floor in patterns that only he understood, humming the same low tune he used when storms frightened him. Now, as lightning blinked beyond the trees, Ella whispered, "Lord, keep him safe. Keep them all safe." She thought of Jaxson, standing in that rain-drenched clearing, his shoulders heavy beneath the weight of Micah's words. She's back. Watch the chapel. Sophia. The name itself was like the scent of smoke, faint but suffocating. Ella rose and crossed to her dresser. Her Bible lay open where she had left it, its thin pages fluttering gently in the draft. Her eyes fell on a verse that seemed to find her rather than the other way around. "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." Isaiah 43:2. She closed her eyes, pressing her hand over the words. "Then walk with me, Lord," she whispered. The phone on her nightstand buzzed. A text from Jaxson. "Meet me at the chapel. I think we need to see it for ourselves." Her pulse jumped. It was nearly 10. Why now? But she didn't hesitate. Something in her heart urged her forward. She pulled on her raincoat, grabbed her flashlight, and slipped into the storm. The chapel stood at the far edge of Willow Creek, a humble white structure with peeling paint and ivy creeping up one side. The night rain gave it a ghostly shimmer, like a memory refusing to fade. Jaxson was already there when she arrived. His truck sat near the old oak, headlights off, rain streaking its windshield. He stood near the steps, soaked but still, watching, listening. Ella stepped closer, her voice a hush. "You shouldn't be out here alone." He turned. The faint light from her flashlight caught his face, shadowed and tense. "Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Micah said, about Sophia." She stopped beside him. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" "I don't know, but I know that look in his eyes, fear. He wasn't lying about that." Thunder murmured somewhere in the hills. The chapel door rattled lightly in the wind. Ella glanced at it, unease creeping up her spine. "Was it like that before?" "No," Jaxson said. He stepped forward, testing the handle. It gave easily. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was colder, heavy with the smell of wax and old hymnals. Their footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor. Candlelight flickered faintly near the altar. One candle, still burning, though no one should have been there. Jaxson's breath slowed. Someone's been here tonight. Ella's eyes darted around the pews, her flashlight beam catching movement, a glint of glass on the floor. She bent down and lifted it. A photo frame, shattered. Inside, a picture of the chapel choir. Her own face smiled from it, alongside Pastor Mark, Liam, and others. The frame had been sliced through the middle, right over Jaxson's face. Ella's hand trembled. Oh no! On the altar, something else caught her attention. A folded paper weighed down by a small stone. She picked it up. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, almost frantic. "He burns everything he touches." Jaxson stepped beside her, reading over her shoulder. His jaw tightened, his voice low. "She's playing games." Ella turned to him. "She's obsessed, Jaxson. Micah said she was dangerous." "I thought she had left years ago. After the fire, she disappeared." "And now she's back, with a reason." The silence that followed was heavy. Rain pattered against the stained glass like a slow, solemn drumbeat. Then, from somewhere behind the altar, a thud. Both froze. Jaxson raised his flashlight. "Stay behind me." They moved cautiously toward the sound. Another thud, this one louder, closer. A door at the back of the chapel swung open slightly, the hinges whining.
Jaxson pushed it wider, revealing the storage room, dark, cluttered with hymnals and candles. The smell hit them first, sharp, chemical, gasoline. "Ella, get back!" Jaxson barked, his voice breaking through the rain's whisper. She stumbled back as he spotted the small red canister on the floor, half empty, and scrolled on the wall in black marker, "Lights out." At that moment, thunder roared so close it shook the rafters. The single candle near the altar flickered violently, then went out. For a heartbeat, everything was dark. Then a faint hiss. Smoke began to curl from the far end of the pews. Jaxson grabbed Ella's wrist. "We have to go, now!" They ran down the aisle as the flames licked upward from beneath the floorboards, creeping fast, hungry. Ella coughed as the smoke thickened, her lungs burned, eyes stinging. "Jaxson, I've got you!" he shouted, shielding her as a beam cracked overhead. The chapel groaned like a wounded animal, the fire feeding off years of old wood and varnish. They burst through the front doors just as a window shattered behind them, the sound sharp as gunfire. Rain met flame in a furious hiss. They stumbled onto the grass, coughing, gasping for air. Ella fell to her knees, trembling. "It's the chapel, Jaxson! She burned the chapel!" He turned, rain dripping down his face, watching the orange glow pulse through the windows. "Not again," he whispered. She looked at him, at the anguish twisting through his features, and something in her heart broke open. "This isn't your fault," she said. Reaching for his hand, he gripped it hard. His voice was hoarse. "They'll think it is. You know they will." "I'll tell them what I saw." "It won't matter," he said bitterly. "Perez never believed me the first time. He'll love this."
A flash of lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the scene. The chapel engulfed, smoke coiling upward like a dark prayer. And through the rain, faintly, from the woods, the sound of a laugh. High, distant, and unmistakably female. Ella froze. "Did you hear that?" Jaxson's gaze snapped toward the trees. The laughter echoed again, fading, teasing, almost joyous in its madness. He whispered, "Sophia." They stood there in the rain, breathless, soaked and shaking, as the flames devoured the only sanctuary Willow Creek had left. And somewhere, deep in the forest, a new shadow stirred.
Chapter 8. The Accused. Dawn crept into Willow Creek beneath a veil of smoke. The chapel stood in ruin, blackened beings rising like the bones of a broken prayer. The rain had done what it could through the night, but the air still smelled of ash and sorrow. Jaxson stood at the edge of the wreckage, boots sinking into the damp earth, his heart pounding like the echo of the fire itself. Every part of him wanted to believe it was just a nightmare, that if he blinked, the chapel would still be standing, the hymn books unburned, the cross untouched. But it wasn't, and neither was his peace. A cluster of townsfolk stood nearby, whispering among themselves. The words floated on the wind. Fire again, Reed's curse, just like before. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. He'd heard it all before, 7 years ago when the forest burned and Micah was caught in the flames. Only this time, it was worse. Because now someone had made sure the evidence pointed straight at him. Officer Perez's cruiser pulled up, tires crunching over gravel. The man stepped out, broad-shouldered and smug, his badge catching the morning light.
"Well, well," Perez said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Didn't think I'd be seeing you at another fire scene, Reed. You sure have a talent for being in the wrong place at the wrong time." Jaxson's hands clenched. "I didn't do this." Perez's gaze swept the smoldering remains. "Funny. That's what you said the last time, isn't it? When Micah ended up in the hospital?" Before Jaxson could answer, Elle appeared from behind one of the burned pews, her coat streaked with soot, eyes red from smoke and tears. She moved quickly to his side, her presence steady, fierce. "Officer Perez, Jaxson was with me when the fire started. We barely made it out alive." Perez raised a brow. That so? And you just happened to be at the chapel at midnight? We were investigating, she replied. Someone left threats. Someone else was there. Perez chuckled darkly. You expect me to believe a ghost story? Jason's patience frayed. It wasn't a ghost. It was Sophia. Perez's smirk faltered for just a second, then returned. Sophia DeLune? Don't tell me that girl's still haunting you, Reed. She's long gone. Everyone knows she left town. Ella stepped forward, voice trembling but sure. We heard her last night, laughing. She's back, and she's dangerous. Perez adjusted his belt, the smirk gone now. You two should go home and clean up. I'll take your statements later. For now, this is a crime scene, and until I say otherwise, you're both suspects. Suspects? Ella exclaimed. He saved me. Perez turned to her slowly. Ms. Thompson, I've got 2 witnesses who say they saw Jason's truck parked here before the blaze. You sure you want to tie yourself to him? The words hung heavy. The crowd stirred, whispers rising like gnats. Ella felt her throat tighten, but she didn't step away. Instead, she reached out and took Jason's hand, right there in front of everyone. I'm sure, she said quietly. The world seemed to hold its breath. Perez's expression darkened. Suit yourself. He turned away, calling to his deputies. Collect everything. I want the arson report by noon. Jason said nothing. He just stood, rain dripping from his hair, watching the chapel's black smoke rise into the pale morning sky. When Perez drove off, Ella turned to him. We'll prove it, Jason. We'll find her. His voice was low. And if no one believes us? She squeezed his hand. Then God will, and that's enough for me. He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes, though tired and red, held something fierce and unbroken. And for a moment the noise of the crowd faded. There was only her hand in his, her steady faith pressing into his shaken heart. The Lord is my defender. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light. Psalm 37:6. Jason nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time I stopped hiding from the shadows. That evening the rain returned, light at first, then harder, tapping against the tin roof of Reed's refuge like a relentless reminder. Jason sat at his workbench staring at a piece of charred wood he had taken from the chapel ruins. The edges were blackened, brittle. When he ran his thumb along it, ash smeared across his hand like soot from an old sin. He whispered, God, I don't understand why you keep letting this follow me. I thought I left it behind. The cabin groaned softly in reply, the wind pushing at the windows, the forest whispering outside. Then came a knock. He tensed. Ella? No answer. He opened the door slowly and found an envelope nailed to the porch post. No stamp, no name. He tore it open. Inside, a single note, written in the same jagged hand as before. Truth burns brighter than guilt. Come find it before the next spark. A small charm fell from the envelope, a silver pendant in the shape of a flame. He recognized it instantly. Sophia used to wear it every Sunday. Jason's pulse quickened. He stepped back, scanning the tree line. The night pressed close around him, quiet, heavy, alive. Somewhere out there she was watching. And for the first time fear gave way to something stronger. Resolve. He grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and keys. If Sophia wanted him to chase the truth, he would. But this time, he wouldn't run alone. At the same hour, Ella sat on her porch, cradling her Bible and staring out onto the mist-covered hills. Her mother slept inside, Liam humming softly from his room. The weight of the day pressed down like wet stone. She closed her eyes and prayed aloud, the words trembling in the rain. Lord, you said the light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Then let your light find us, find him. As she whispered, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A shadow at the edge of her garden. She froze. "Who's there?" No reply. Her flashlight beam cut across the yard. And there, barely visible in the rain, a figure stood near the gate. A woman, tall, still, watching. Ella's breath caught in her throat. "Sophia," she whispered. The figure tilted her head, almost smiling, and then vanished into the mist. The flashlight slipped from her hand. Thunder rumbled in the distance again, softer this time, but closer than before. And somewhere deep in the forest, a single word echoed faintly on the wind, carried from unseen lips. "Guilty."
Chapter 9. Whispers in the Ashes. The storm broke again over Willow Creek just before dawn, lightning clawing across the sky, thunder shaking the windows of every house in town. Ella hadn't slept. She sat on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, the faint glow of a lantern painting the walls in soft amber. Her mother's breathing from the next room was shallow but steady. Liam sat on the rug, lining up puzzle pieces, humming his gentle tune, the one that meant he was trying to calm himself. But Ella's thoughts weren't calm. They kept circling back to the shadow at her gate, to the faint smile in the rain, to that one word, guilty, that still rang in her ears. She whispered, "God, what if she really is back? What if—" A sudden pounding on the door made her jump. Liam froze, eyes wide. She rose slowly, clutching her Bible to her chest, and opened the door. And there, drenched, trembling, and pale as the morning light, stood Micah. "Micah!" He gasped. "I didn't know where else to go." Her heart thudded. "Micah? What happened?" He stumbled inside, dripping onto the floor, clutching his side as though he'd been running for miles. "She found me," he said hoarsely. "Sophia. She knows I told you. She's not after Jason anymore. She's after you." Ella's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Micah sank into a chair, shivering. "She blames you, says you turned him against her. She's not thinking straight, Ella. I tried to stop her." Ella steadied herself against the table. "You have to tell the police!" Micah laughed bitterly. "Perez, he won't listen. He's still covering for her." Her pulse quickened. "Covering?" He looked up, eyes haunted. "He's her cousin, Ella. You didn't know?" The room seemed to tilt. All this time, Perez, dismissing the threats, the warnings, the evidence, protecting her. Ella whispered, "Dear Lord." Micah pressed a folded paper into her hand. "She left this at my cabin last night. Said it's time for Jason to confess. She's planning something at Reed's Refuge. Tonight." Ella opened the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, jagged, angry. "Truth burns brightest where guilt hides deepest. The ashes will speak again." Micah's voice broke. "I think she means to burn it, like before." Ella's breath caught. "No, not again." She turned to Liam, who had begun rocking, his fingers in his ears, eyes squeezed shut. She rushed to him, kneeling. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're safe." He shook his head, whispering, "Jay, fire, chapel." Her heart stopped. He remembered. He'd seen something that night. "Liam," she said softly, touching his face, "you saw someone at the chapel, didn't you, before the fire?" He hesitated, then nodded. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Lady. Red coat." Ella's pulse raced. "Sophia's coat," she murmured. "You saw her?" Liam's lips trembled. "Bad lady. Hurt Jay." Tears filled her eyes. She kissed his forehead. "You're so brave." She stood, grabbed her coat, and turned to Micah.
We're going to Reed's refuge. If Sophia's there, Jaxson needs to know before she does something worse. Micah hesitated. Ella, she's dangerous. So is silence, Ella said firmly. But God didn't call us to be silent in the face of evil. She reached for her Bible and whispered, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Psalm 27:1. The mountain road was slick with rain and fog as Ella drove toward Reed's refuge. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the trees like white ghosts.
Micah sat in the passenger seat, clutching his arm. "Do you think he's still there?" he asked. Ella nodded. "He said he was repairing the cabins. He won't leave while he's being accused again." Micah looked out the window. "He doesn't deserve this." "No," Ella said softly, "but maybe this time God's going to use the truth to end it."
At the camp, Jaxson stood by the main cabin, the silver pendant still in his hand. He hadn't slept either. His tools lay untouched, his thoughts were scattered. Every shadow felt alive. He had been waiting for Sophia, for answers, for something he could finally face instead of run from. When headlights appeared on the dirt road, his grip tightened on the pendant. He stepped forward, ready. But when Ella stepped out of the car, his breath caught. "Ella?" She rushed to him, rain in her hair, fear and determination in her eyes. "Jaxson, we have to go. She's coming here tonight. Sophia's planning to burn the camp." His stomach twisted. "What?" Micah followed behind her, pale but resolute. "She's not bluffing. I tried to stop her." Jaxson's eyes narrowed. "You should have told me sooner." "I'm telling you now," Micah snapped. "She's not after you anymore. She's after her."
Ella's hand found Jaxson's. "We can't let this happen again." He looked at her, at the fear she was hiding behind faith, at the rain streaking her face like tears, and something inside him hardened. "Then we end it tonight." Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the ground. Micah turned toward the forest. "We can't stay out in the open. She'll see us coming." Jaxson nodded and led them toward the tool shed, the same one where the word guilty was carved. The irony burned. They slipped inside. The air smelled of damp earth and oil. Jaxson lit the lantern. "We wait here. She'll come when the rain lets up." Ella's voice trembled. "How can you be sure?" "Because she wants an audience," he said. "She always did." Micah sank against the wall. "If Perez finds out I'm here, I'm finished." "Perez won't protect her this time, not when we catch her in the act." He didn't know if he believed his own words, but faith, he'd learned, often walked hand in hand with fear. Minutes dragged. The rain softened to a drizzle. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called, long, low, haunting. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Ella held her breath. The sound moved closer, twigs snapping, leaves brushing. Micah peered through the crack in the boards. "She's here." Jaxson's pulse roared in his ears. He whispered, "Stay behind me." The footsteps stopped just outside the shed. Silence. Then, a soft, taunting voice. "Still hiding in the dark, Jay?" Ella's heart froze. "Sophia." He stepped forward, jaw tight. "It's over, Sophia." Her laugh was low, melodic, chilling. "No, love, it's only beginning again." He opened the door slowly, rain mist curling through the gap. And there she was. Sophia stood under the trees, her red coat glistening, hair plastered to her face, eyes wild with something between fury and heartbreak. She held a matchbook between her fingers. "I told you, truth burns brightest." "Put it down," Jaxson said. She shook her head. "You took everything from me, my art, my peace, my life." "You burned your own peace," he said quietly. "And I've carried the guilt ever since, but not anymore." Her eyes flashed. "Liar!" Micah stepped out behind Jaxson. "He's not lying, Sophia. I was the one texting when the fire started. It was my fault."
Sophia's expression twisted, disbelief and rage colliding. No, that's not... It's the truth, Ella said. And you've been running from it ever since. Rain hissed on the leaves. The match trembled in Sophia's hand. Don't, Jaxson said softly. Please, don't do this again. For a moment, her face broke. A flicker of pain, of the girl she'd once been. Then lightning flashed, and she screamed, flinging the lit match into the air. It fell toward the ground, toward the fuel-soaked grass. Jaxson lunged. The world exploded into light.
Chapter 10. The Weaver's Hands. The fire roared like a beast unleashed, flames swallowing the grass, clawing at the shed walls, devouring the night. Jaxson barely felt the heat on his skin as he slammed the door shut and threw himself over Ella, shielding her from the blast. The air cracked with thunder and ash. Somewhere behind him, Micah screamed. "Jaxson!" Ella's voice trembled beneath him. He turned, saw the fire climbing the roof, smoke curling like black ribbons toward heaven. "We have to move!" He grabbed her hand and pulled her through the open side door. The world outside was chaos, wind, flame, and rain colliding in a furious dance. Sophia's red coat flickered like a warning in the firelight as she stumbled backward, eyes wide, horror dawning on her face. "No!" she cried. "I didn't mean—" But the flames were already spreading, devouring her creation. Jaxson ran toward her through the smoke. "Sophia!" She backed away, coughing, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "It wasn't supposed to happen again!" He reached her, grabbing her wrist before she could collapse. "It doesn't have to end this way." Her eyes met his, desperate, broken. "You still don't get it, do you? You were supposed to save me." He shook his head, breath ragged. "I can't save you, Sophia. Only God can." Something in her eyes shattered then, as if his words pierced through the years of bitterness. She sagged against him, sobbing. The wind shifted, and the flames leapt higher, swallowing the path behind them. "Jaxson!" Ella screamed from the clearing. "The trees! They're going!" He pulled Sophia toward safety. Micah appeared out of the smoke, his sleeve on fire. Jaxson tore it off and dragged him with them until they all burst into the rain-soaked clearing. They collapsed together in the mud, coughing, shaking, the fire dying behind them. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain. Then Ella crawled to Jaxson, her hand trembling as it touched his face. "You're hurt." He laughed weakly. "I've been worse." Her tears mixed with the rain. "Don't say that." He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "You prayed me through that fire, didn't you?" She smiled softly. "Maybe. Or maybe God wasn't done with you yet." He closed his eyes. "Maybe not." Hours later, the rain had put out the fire. The fire department arrived just before dawn, their lights flickering through the mist like red ghosts. Perez stood among them, his face pale, his uniform soaked. When he saw Jaxson alive and Sophia in handcuffs, he didn't speak, just lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. Ella stood beside Jaxson, her arm linked with his. He knew. He protected her. Jaxson nodded slowly. The truth has a way of finding daylight. Sophia didn't resist as they led her away. She only looked back once, her expression distant, lost. Ella murmured, "Be sure your sin will find you out." Jaxson whispered the rest. "But grace finds us too." Perez turned to them then, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything." Jaxson said quietly, "Then make it right." And Perez did. The next morning, his written confession exposed the years of cover-ups, the falsified reports, the silence that had buried the truth. The news spread fast. By evening, Jaxson Reed was no longer the man blamed for the chapel fire. He was the man who rebuilt what the ashes couldn't destroy. Weeks passed. The town of Willow Creek began to heal. Where the fire had raged, the earth grew green again. Where the chapel once stood, they laid the foundation for something new. Not just a building, but a home of worship and refuge. Jaxson stood on the hill one morning, hammer in hand, the rising sun painting the valley gold. Behind him, children's laughter floated from the cabins, the first camp session since the fire. He smiled faintly. The past hadn't vanished. It had been redeemed. A soft voice came from behind him. "You still come up here early?" He turned. Ella walked toward him, a gentle smile playing on her lips, her long dress brushing the dew. "Habit," he said, returning her smile. She joined him, gazing at the half-built chapel below. "It's beautiful. Every stone feels like it's been prayed over." He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just the woman who had believed in him, but the one who had helped him believe again. He said quietly, "I used to think I was building to prove something. Now I just build because I'm grateful." Ella nodded. "You've come a long way, Jaxson Reed." "So have you." They stood together in silence, the wind gentle, the smell of pine and smoke faint in the air. A memory of what had been burned and what had been reborn. Jaxson's hand brushed hers, hesitant, reverent. She didn't pull away. He said softly, "You once told me you felt God brought you here for a reason." She smiled. "I think we both know what that reason was now." He looked down at their joined hands. "To rebuild. To forgive," she whispered. "To love," he finished. The chapel bell, newly hung, rang once clear and bright across the valley. They both looked toward it, tears in their eyes. Ella whispered, "To appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, beauty for ashes." Jaxson nodded. "Beauty for ashes. That's all I ever wanted."
The morning light spilled over them, warm and forgiving. And as the camp stirred awake, laughter echoing from the hills, Jaxson finally felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. Not the fleeting peace of silence, but the deep, soul-rooted calm that comes when every broken piece is finally placed back into the hands of the weaver himself.
Thank you for listening. If you like this audio recording, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our audio recordings.